and welcome to this week's Used Car Heaven, another packed programme, including in part 2 we're going off-roading. Well, sort of anyway. We're driving two off-roaders, both from Landrover. More from our car doctor Simon Hughes, back in his surgery again, and Richard Hammond will have more tips and tricks. But in part 1 we're driving two executive cars, both from BMW, the creme de la creme, the 5 Series and the 3 Series. So, if you aspire to buying and owning a BMW 5 Series, but you've always thought that they're a bit too expensive, well, think again, because they're not. The early 5 Series cars, the shape before this one, well, they're getting seriously cheap. The cars that run from, 1987 through to 1996, 3 or 4 grand would buy you a decent one. But this is one of the first of the new 5 Series shapes, 1996, an NREG 523 SE, 77,000 miles for only 9 grand. And because it's the SE spec, you get leather upholstery, you get the walnut wood trimmings, you get a quality stereo system, and you get air conditioning and a multi-function steering wheel to go along with it, all for 9 grand. BMW's much praised 5 Series has won so many awards over the years that the trophy cabinets back at BMW headquarters must be absolutely bulging. And you can always guarantee that whenever a car magazine puts together a multi-test between, say, the 5 Series and the Mercedes E-Class and the Audi A6, you always know that the 5 Series is going to win. And some car magazines will just award the 5 Series the best category, come what may. But rightly so, it's a very good car to drive. Now, this Model 5 Series was launched first back in 1996, and a car like this on an NREG is one of the first examples. One thing to check, service history, absolutely vital. Over the years since the launch of the first BMW 5 Series, at least the specification on these cars has got better. Gone are the days when you didn't even get a radio as standard in a BMW. Thankfully, these days, the spec is good. Nicely weighted power steering, ABS brakes, and good all-round visibility. It's just a nice, relaxing car to drive the 5 Series. But if you want to have a blast on your favourite B-road, then this is the ideal car to do it in too. It's sporty when you want it to be. Always fancied having a 5 Series gracing your driveway at home? Well, now you can for little cash. The NREG car we drove was a bargain. Perhaps not the best colour, but at that price, who cares? A great chassis and superb engines make the 5 Series a real driver's car. I bet you never realised a BMW 5 Series like this could be so cheap, £9,000. Coming next, we'll drive the baby BMW, the 3 Series, but first, here's Richard Hammond.
Right, students, welcome along to the course. Now, over the next 3 weeks, we're going to learn everything you need to know when you're thinking of buying one of these. We're going to look at everything you need to know about the outside, the inside, and the engine. But for our first lesson, we're keeping it simple. They say you can't judge a book by the cover. Well, I say you can, or you can learn an awful lot, and here's how. Remember, it may not be glamorous getting down to the dirty business of checking out a used car, but it could be all the difference between buying a runner and something that's only fit for this. It just makes you shudder, doesn't it? So let's make sure it doesn't happen to our new car. First job, open the doors, all of them, all over the place, bonnet, boot, the lot. Once they're open, you're looking around areas like this. Straight away we're getting under the surface and looking for secrets. Move all the rubber around, have a look at the edges. What we're looking for is blistered paint, anything that looks like rust coming through underneath. Also seams where it might have been welded. Cut and shut, we've all heard about it. You'll see seams. Have a good look around and do that everywhere, all over the place. While the doors are open, have a feel around underneath and make sure that the outer skin of the door isn't separating away from the frame of the thing. That's pretty important and it's easily done. Don't forget moisture, water, it all collects around here and it eats away at your car, and it's places where people hide secrets that you've got to uncover. It's not difficult to see when it's right, and it's certainly not difficult to see when it's wrong. So, by looking behind, around and under the doors, bonnet and boot, we've learned an awful lot about the structural integrity of the car. Now we're going to look at the skin, the body panels, the surface. Try this. Look the full length of it, because from this angle you can see dents, waves and ripples that you might not see from other angles. Try as well running your hand literally over every body panel. You're feeling for areas of filler, obviously a cheap alternative to replacing a busted panel. Look as well at the shut lines, the gaps in between all the panels, the doors, the bonnet, the boot, the wings. And what we're looking for here is to make sure they're a constant distance as they were when they left the factory. Make sure they're the same on both sides of the car as well, because if they're not, it might indicate the panels have been busted in a bit of a crash and then badly replaced or shoddily worked on. With a bit of practice, actually, this is very easy, and it's very easy to see when it's right and when it's wrong. Now it's time to take a step back and look at the whole car. And what we're looking at is the paintwork. And what we're looking for is, well, it's simple enough really, is every panel the same colour? Because if it's not, that indicates it might have been cheaply resprayed, which means it may have been crashed. So look at it carefully. Does it match? Then we move in closer. And we switch to X-ray vision, because what we're trying to do now is see through the paint to the bodywork underneath. And we're looking for things like evidence of small, faint, circular scratches actually under the paint, because that would indicate filler. Bad news. You might also see small crater-like depressions where the paint has shrunk away from the filler. Again, bad news. Sometimes this is quite tricky to spot. Sometimes it's blinking obvious. We're not quite done yet, just a few final checks to add to your list. Go to the front and rear screens and try, if you can, to lift the rubber and have a look, because it's under here that rain gathers and you get rust, and it can be very bad news. It's difficult and expensive to repair. Do the same for a sunroof as well. Lift the rubber if there is one fitted. Also, look around things like the door handles, the badges on the bonnet and on the tailgate, anything attached to the car for a build-up of paint, because that could indicate a cheap bodged spray job, and that could indicate it's been crashed. Bad news.
I've owned quite a few cars in my time, but I've never actually owned a BMW. No particular reason. I've had a Merc and an Audi and a Jag, but a 3 Series has never quite appealed to me enough to actually buy one. And in some parts of the country, these 3 Series cars are, to be honest, 10 a penny. There are so many about, but you can see why people love them. They're a cracking car to drive, although inside, the 3 Series to me has always been a bit austere and a bit drab and a bit dull. Sure, the equipment levels have improved dramatically over the past few years, so you do get a stereo system and you do get air conditioning. Now this car would cost you about £14,000 and it's about 2 years old. There can be no doubting that the BMW 3 Series is Britain's most popular executive car. It outsells and outstrips the Mercedes C-Class and the Audi A4 by tens of thousands of units every year, and it still remains very popular despite there being lots and lots of these cars on the road. Exclusivity doesn't seem to bother BMW 3 Series drivers, and it is a lovely car to drive. It's smooth and it's slick. The steering is very, very precise, and I think that any car maker, any car manufacturer would give their right arm to be able to produce a car as good as the BMW 3 Series. So these Shape 3 Series were launched first in 1998, so they've been around for what, three and a half years now, and the early cars are getting cheaper. What sort of money would you have to pay to get a nice one? Well, 11 or 12,000 pounds. Make sure that they've got full service history. If they haven't, walk away, because there are plenty other on the market to choose from. A car like this has done nearly 20,000 miles. When this was new, would have cost around 23 grand. Now you could pick this up for about 14 and a half. You could hardly say that this 318 is a quick car, particularly not when it's in automatic form like this. 0 to 60 takes around 11 or 12 seconds with a top speed of 120 miles an hour. The 3 Series range starts with the base model, the 316, then there's this 318. There's a 323, which gets a 2.5 litre engine, 328, and the new 330. If you want a diesel, you can choose the 320 or the 330 diesel. Again, excellent fuel economy, averaging between 45 to 50 miles to the gallon.
It's always a delight to get behind the wheel of a 3 Series again, and that's when you realise how lucky owners of these cars are. Nimble and sharp, the 3 Series really is a delight to drive. It can be boring at times reading road tests in car magazines who always mark these cars high, but the justification is spot on.
Nimble and sharp, the BMW 3 Series is a delight to drive. And think about this. For £14,500, you could have a brand new Ford Focus Gear, or you could have this BMW 3 Series. And I know which car I would choose. That's it for part 1 of Used Car Heaven. Back in part 2 when we're driving Land Rovers. Hello and welcome back to part 2 of Used Car Heaven. Now in this part of the programme we're going off-road. Now it's difficult clambering along muddy banks like this for us humans, but what about in cars? Well, we've got 2 very good 4x4s to put to the test, both from Land Rover, the Freelander and the Range Rover. Now the Freelander has been on the market for just over 3 years now, and in that time it's been a runaway success for Land Rover. It's a smaller and more compact 4x4 than their other cars, the Discovery and the Range Rover. Now this car, when it was new around about 2.5 years ago, would have cost £22,000, but now it would sell for just over £11,000. It's done a slightly higher mileage, about 45,000, but it's a bit of a bargain. So what do you need to look out for on the Freelander? Well, they've been pretty reliable cars since they were launched. Not too much goes wrong on these cars as long as they've got full service history. One other thing to point out on these sort of cars, and indeed on many cars that you're buying, is colour. Some cars are very colour sensitive. This dark and dreary, dirty blue colour is not a good colour on this car. Whites, golds and solid green colours also bad to buy. They can affect the resale value in the future, whether you're selling it privately or back into the trade. Inside, well, you get all the recruitments. You've got air conditioning, you've got the clever hill descent control system too. Now coming around the back of the Freelander, it's not a bad boot back here. It's not absolutely huge though, and you perhaps might struggle if you're taking 5 adults and all their luggage on holiday. But one clever thing that the Freelander has got is a very clever rear tailgate where the glass portion here goes down automatically using the zapper, so you can load in your shopping bags or things like that. It's very, very clever. Up until now, there'd only been a choice of 2 engines in the Freelander range, a 1.8 petrol, this car, or a 2-litre turbo diesel. But now there's an all-new 2.5 V6 with the option of having an automatic gearbox. Now that car has been built primarily so that they can export the Freelander to the United States, where they wouldn't touch anything that had a 1.8 engine or a manual gearbox. The Freelander is probably the best vehicle to come out of the Solihull factory. It looks good both inside and out, and you can get lots of accessories just to finish off your Freelander into the way that you want it. Now this XE model gets quite a bit of trim on it. This car has done 45,000 miles, so it's slightly above average mileage, and that's why it would sell for just over £11,000.
For me, the Freelander has always been a car that offers a lot but somehow fails to hit the mark. I've always been slightly disappointed with the way it drives, but off-road ability and a clever cabin makes the Freelander popular. Residuals are easing now, making it more affordable used.
Well, coming up next, I'll be testing the Range Rover, but first, here's our car doctor, Simon Hughes.
When you take your car for an MOT, you don't know what it's going to fail on. A common thing these days are damaged windscreens. Now, if it's cracked, you may be covered on your insurance and get it replaced. But if it's scratched or marked, you definitely won't be covered, and it can be an expensive option if you've got to pay for one yourself. What we're going to do is have a look at how to polish one out and also show you how you can do it yourself at home. This car's got a bad scratch on the windscreen that you can see just here, and basically that's caused by a windscreen wiper that is faulty. What we're going to do is polish it out effectively, and I've got my polishing kit here. We've got a container of water that we're going to spray on it. You can see I've used a red pen to put some colour on the windscreen on the inside so I can see where I'm going, and then we've got a combination of water and some magic powder to mix up in this dish. We're going to make into like a paste, a runny paste, that we're going to soak this special magic flexible disc with, and we're going to apply the paste on the screen, and then we're going to hopefully sand it away or polish it away very, very carefully. Now then, we've got a couple of tips here. First of all, this is glass and it will break very, very easily. So much so I've broken these windscreens, particularly on these cars, by just sticking a mirror on the inside. And also, because the screen is laminated, we've actually got layers of glass and plastic. We've got to remember not to allow too much heat to build up from the actual polishing process, so we've got to apply a lot of water. It's a bit messy, and once I start, I'm just going to get stuck in and see how we go. Right, that should be done now, so we've got to now clear it off, check it, and see how we go on. So let's give it a good clean off, and hopefully the marks, the red felt tip's obviously still there, but the marks will hopefully have gone. And I don't know if you can see that, but I can certainly see there's no mark in there now at all. That'll pass an MOT. And all we've got to do is clear off the red felt tip, wash off the windscreen, clean it all up, and then charge the punter.
So, you've always dreamt of owning a Range Rover, have you? Well, let me show you one of the most important features, and that's round here near the back. This is the fuel filler cap. And round here, you'll be spending many happy hours as a Range Rover owner, if you buy a petrol model, that is. Because here is where you'll put £70 worth of petrol in to fill the car up, which will get you about 200 miles to the tank, which equates to about 12 miles to the gallon. Put 10 quid's worth of fuel in this thing and you hardly notice the gauge moving. Still fancy a Range Rover? Inside this 4-litre counter you get all the trim that you would expect to find in a Range Rover. Leather seats, wood trim. Make sure if you're looking for a Range Rover that you find a car that has all the bits working properly. We're talking about the electric mirrors and the electric windows and the air conditioning blowing nice cold air out. One other fascinating feature on the Range Rover is the air suspension. You can have it set high for off-roading or low, like this, for easy access in and out.
Brake is.
If you want to be seen in a car, then the ultimate for me is the Range Rover. Forget about S-Class Mercedes and Bentleys. The Range Rover is the car to be seen in. People who buy a Range Rover buy into the brand, and they like all the accessories to go with it, the running boards and the bull bars and the nudge bars. The Range Rover has been on top in the four-wheel drive kingdom for a long time, despite the fact that the Mercedes M-Class and the BMW X5 have tried to topple it. None have quite managed to succeed it, despite the fact that both of those cars probably drive better than the Range Rover. As you would expect with such a big car like this, there's plenty of body roll going round corners, but Range Rover have improved that over the years and made it better. Now, there are 3 different engines to choose from in the range, 2 petrol and 1 diesel. Most customers go for the petrol cars. You can either have a 4-litre like this or the 4.6. Both of them are very thirsty and neither particularly quick. The diesel is a BMW diesel unit, a 2.5 turbo diesel, and that will return getting close to 30 miles to the gallon on average. The Range Rover has such a commanding on-road presence. Of course, you sit high in the car, you can see over the hedges when you're driving through narrow country lanes like this, and the car feels a lot bigger than it actually is. Inside, though, there's plenty of room for the passengers. Now, these model Range Rovers were first launched in 1994, so they've been around for a long time now. They're due for a replacement within the next 2 years, and that's going to be an all-new Range Rover, including one that might cost up to £100,000. But forget about paying silly money like that. Buy a car like this with 21,000 miles on the clock. This could be yours for just over £20,000 for a car that cost 40 grand new.
The undisputed king of off-roaders, with an all-new Range Rover due next year, there are plenty of used models about. An MREG 4.6 HSE at a main dealer could be yours for 13 grand. But remember that shocking fuel consumption. The diesel may not be quick, but it certainly will be better for the bank balance.
Whilst you could never say that spending £21,000 on a car is cheap, it's not bad for a 2-year-old example like this, which cost originally £40,000 new. I reckon this is a bit of a bargain. That's it for this week's Used Car Heaven. We'll be back at the same time next week.